attending this. I just got something from the film festival. Okay. Hello and welcome everyone to the Breckenridge Film Festival. My name is Debra Fox and I want to welcome everyone to the Q&A for Liberation Heroes. And we're so honored to have the award-winning director of the movie, Vanessa Roth, with us for the question and answer session. I will be asking a number of questions and then we're going to open up the questions and the Q&A to the audience. If you have a question, please type it in and I will read it. But before we get to the questions, I wanted to share with you the awards and the accolades that Liberation Heroes has received. And these are just a few of many. So the film was the winner at the Sedona International Film Festival for Best Short Documentary. It was the winner at the Normandy World War II International Film Festival for Outstanding Documentary Film, the winner at Impact Documentary Awards in the category for Best of Show. And that's just to name a few. I think there was a list of 2 pages of awards and accolades. And again, I'm so thrilled to have our director with us, Vanessa Roth, and she's created numerous documentaries for Netflix, Amazon, ESPN, Discovery, HBO, PBS, and A&E. She lives in New York City with her husband and her 3 children, and she is the daughter of screenwriter Eric Roth, who many of you probably know, wrote the screenplays for Forrest Gump, A Star is Born, and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And now it's a great honor to introduce you to the award-winning director, Vanessa Roth, excuse me. And I think I'll just start out by asking you, what compelled you to direct this film?
Yeah, so hello, first of all, and thank you for chatting with me. You know, this film to me is just really special because it's about memory and it's about legacy. And I think that those are 2 of the sort of the most important things we have sort of generation to generation. And I think that the Shoah Foundation has this archive of thousands of interviews with survivors from the Holocaust and over 400 interviews of liberators. And both of those categories of people are leaving us. They're growing old and they're passing away, and those witnesses don't exist anymore. So this film to me was so important to make sure we heard their voices and heard their stories.
Can you talk a little bit about the Shoah Foundation? You mentioned that.
Yeah, so the Shoah Foundation was started by Steven Spielberg when he made Schindler's List. He wanted to do interviews with every living survivor from the Holocaust, and he then added on also the liberators, as well as now they interview survivors of other genocides and wars from history and around the world to make sure that they document the firsthand accounts of people so that these atrocities in human history are never forgotten. So, so that Shoah Foundation has this collection of interviews that I'll make sure to give access or to give the information to whoever's watching. You can actually access those interviews online on something called the Visual History Archive through the Shoah Foundation. And they're just priceless, wonderful, beautiful testimonies from people's firsthand experiences in all these events.
And we can get that out in a follow-up email
Yep.
to those.
Yep.
And also, you know, there were a number of the World War II veterans that you showed were from the archives of the Shoah Foundation, correct?
Yeah, so the film is a combination of we spoke with 3 living liberators who were all in their 90s, and I think Virgil was 101 when we spoke with him. But Alan Moskin and Aldine, as well as Virgil, we spoke with them. And then the other liberators that are in the film have all passed away since. But their testimonies were so important to include. And what we really wanted to do is make sure that we made a film that showed just the diversity of life experience and race and culture and gender of the people who did fight in World War II and were liberators. So we made sure to include, there were Japanese Americans, there were Black Americans, there were women. And I think that in other portrayals of liberators and sort of World War II heroes, as we think of them, I think sometimes we think it's just sort of that lone cowboy coming in and saving everything. And that's not really what it was. So we really wanted to tell a story of the real people and the real human experience that they had. And from the interviews that were done in the 90s by the Shoah Foundation and the ones we did, the collective experience was one of shock and surprise. They didn't feel like they were heroes. And that was something we wanted to make sure we explored.
And yes, they knew very little about the camps, and they just kind of came onto the camps by accident. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So in the film, I mean, as you see, they didn't know much. I mean, the Americans at the time were getting the news just sort of in the US of what was going on in the war. They were given very little news about the camps. And when they were in Europe, they were still getting very little news of the camps, if any at all. They heard sort of rumors, but they were just looking straight in front of them and knew whatever battle they had to go into. But none of them, from the interviews that I've watched and the people that I spoke with, none of them really were thinking that what they were doing was going to liberate camps. So when they, as you see in the film, when they arrive at the camps, they're very unprepared. They're very shocked. They're horrified, and they're confused. So, they became traumatized, obviously, by the experience they had, and many of them, or maybe most of them, didn't speak of this experience when they came home. They were so traumatized by what they saw and what they needed to do that many of them, and this is something that Alan Moskin talked to me a lot about, is he just kept it silent. It's also what Leon Bass, who's in the film as well, kept it silent from his wife, their children. And it wasn't until they were much older that did they all feel really the need to speak when they saw repeated history and human behavior, and they realized that they need to tell their story.
So what was the reaction of the liberators to partaking in this film?
They were happy to do it. Alan speaks with thousands and thousands of school children, and he really goes on a tour and speaks all over the place, because I think from what he explained to us, after not speaking about it for so much time, when he did speak about it and he saw the kind of impact he was having on people and actually just educating people when he didn't realize that people didn't really understand a lot about the Holocaust, the kids that he was speaking to, he really realized it was his calling, really. And so he is happy to talk, I won't say happy, but his drive and his passion and his motivation for everything is to make sure that people never forget what he saw and avoid that ever happening again.
Vanessa, do you think it was therapeutic or hurtful to the liberators to see the film?
To see the film?
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point, the liberators that are still living, they live with this, have lived with this for most of their lives. They were young, when they went into war. Alan, they were late teens, early 20s. Then the rest of their life has been with this memory, this sense memory, this part of themselves, you know, it's a piece of them. So I don't know that seeing the movie itself necessarily would be, you know, any more sort of healing or traumatic to them. I think it's nice, it was nice for them to see this come out. Mostly I think they felt, from what they said to me, is they just, again, main point is they just want the story to continue to be told and shared and people to be educated. And I think from my understanding, from what they've said to me, really where they get their just joy, pure joy, and really feel their impact is when they speak with kids, you know, and they speak with different generations of people about their experience. So, you know, when we've had screenings and Alan's been at a screening, or, you know, when we saw Virgil with his family watching the movie, I think just that exchange between them and an audience is really what does it for them.
You know, it just sounds as if that has become a very therapeutic experience for them.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, I think for sure, I know you had said maybe I should mention this too. So sort of a personal story is my mom years ago was actually one of the first interviewers to volunteer for the Shoah Foundation in the early 90s in San Diego. And I remember her stories coming home from doing these interviews with them. And at that point, it was the first time that a lot of the survivors and liberators had ever spoken about their story. So I do know from at that point when they did the Shoah Foundation interviews, you know, this was something that was tremendously healing for them and therapeutic.
Right, right. So this is a question from the audience, from Diana. She says, Vanessa, you are a very talented filmmaker. Tell us about your Oscar win.
Thank you. I won an Oscar for producing a short film that I made with a really talented director, Cynthia Wade. That film was called Freeheld. It was about a woman who was a police officer, a detective. She got brain cancer, and she wanted her pension to go to her partner, who was a woman, and they weren't married, and that the domestic partner law in the county they were in would not let her give her pension to her partner. So we had followed them for the last 10 weeks of her life while she fought to be given the equal right to be able to pass her retirement and everything on to her partner. So that film.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the kind of awards that this recent film that you made, Liberation Heroes, has gotten?
To be honest, it's a very nice thing to see when the film gets shown, when it gets honored. And to me, I find that the honor and the awards are really for the liberators, you know, who have shared their stories, and it's honoring them. I feel like my job is just really almost I'm just like a curator of storytelling, and try to just amplify the voices that I hear and you know, give voice and just represent people's stories the best I can. So awards are lovely. It's wonderful if it helps spread the word, but actually, to me, it's also, again, like the impact that they have, and hopefully raise awareness, you know, about issues that are important.
Well, you did an incredible job. And we have another, I would say more like a comment from the audience. And I hope I can pronounce your name right. This is from Susana. And she says, Vanessa, your film is incredibly powerful and inclusive. For me to watch it was eye-opening. I grew up as a Jew in Slovakia in the 80s, third generation, and never really saw these things from a liberator's perspective. Captivating, powerful, and very, very relevant today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
Nice.
And I think it's so interesting too what she brings up about these different perspectives on experience. And when we, when we hear survivor stories or we hear the liberator stories, and I was so interested to hear these stories that we had a nurse and we had, Alan, who had gone into the military, but he was a Jewish man from, from Jersey, who had just sort of joined because everyone was doing it, kind of thing, and was excited about it, to get to Virgil, who was a Japanese American who had come from a farm, and just sort of the diversity of stories just within this country of the people who went there. And then in the film, we have Russian stories as well. And the fact that, in liberating the camps was something that was a joint effort.
Right. So I have a question from Cynthia. She would like to know a little bit more about you and your history.
Let's see. As Debra mentioned, my dad's a screenwriter. I grew up in Del Mar, a little beach town in San Diego. My mom was an archaeologist and an anthropologist. I was very influenced by my grandparents, who were from New York originally. They were very involved in just real equal rights and social justice. They did a lot of protesting. I grew up with a family that was just very active in advocacy and activism in whatever way they could. What else? I went, I knew sort of growing up, I wanted to be a storyteller in some way. But when I sort of watched my dad through sort of the film business, I didn't know if sort of the film industry was my thing. I went and I have a master's degree in social work and family law, thinking that I would do something, again, with social justice in some way, and documentaries is sort of, I didn't know I would still be doing it, but I made a documentary as the sort of my thesis for my master's program for social work at Columbia. And that first project won, I won a DuPont Columbia award for that. And I think sometimes when I was younger and I just didn't know any of it. I didn't realize like that was a very important award to win, which was lovely because it then got me a lot of grants to do other work. And that was about foster care. And so since then, which was now like 25 years ago or more, I try to find projects that just really speak to the human experience. And the part of my job I love is I get access to people's lives that I would never have in any other kind of job. And I think what I learn every single time I do a film is just about connectivity and really how connected we all are, and how, generation to generation and across the planet and time, how much we just impact each other. So that's it. I have 3 kids. They're all at this moment here. We're, supposed to be off in their lives. 2 one that graduated and was supposed to be off in her life, and she's now here because of COVID, and now they're doing virtual classes for college. And then I have a boy. So that's me.
That's quite a biography, Vanessa. You're so incredibly accomplished, and your films just go so deep. I mean, that was just an extraordinary film that you made and produced. And Susanna asked another question here. She wants to know how we can assure these stories will continue being shared after these people are physically gone. Yeah. Great question.
Yeah.
That's one, and then I'm going to ask a couple more.
So I'm just, sorry, I'm looking to the side here because I just want to make sure I get the details of this right. But so the Shoah Foundation, their mission, so first this film was on the Discovery Channel to start with. And then through the Visual History Archive, which is what I can give people access to look at interviews if they want, as well as through the Shoah Foundation. The Shoah Foundation, this film was part of an initiative that they have that's called Stronger Than Hate. And so through the Stronger Than Hate initiative, they're going into, I just want to get again the numbers right, but yeah, okay. So so what the Stronger Than Hate initiative and Shoah Foundation will bring, and is bringing, the film and educational tools and guides for teachers and everything into schools around the world, and into educational programs and museums and universities. So they use this film in all kinds of ways, and they put it together with their Stronger Than Hate initiative, which is all about hate, not only during genocides and wars, but in everyday life, and really talking about how do we combat hate, how do we talk about those things, how do we, you know, how do we continue to be witness and speak against hate, and speak and just, you know, continue to educate people. So the film is being used and seen, and again used as a tool for lots of education.
Yes, and as a follow-up, I loved how you had Alan talk to the ROTC recruit. And, you
Yeah.
know, watching those faces, and I was just, first of all, can you talk a little bit about that? But also, I was wondering whether this should be required viewing for all ROTC and military service recruits, and if anything is happening.
Yeah, that would be great. And I think that, yeah, they absolutely are making it available, you know, to them as well. And yeah, I wanted to, the reason I wanted to do that and include the ROTC kids in this film was sort of like I mentioned the beginning about connectivity, is the thing to me that drove me to do this film, and the thing that that also I think drove one of the producers, Andy Friendly, whose father was Fred Friendly, who was Edward Murrow's partner. Fred had, like, a sort of long story to come back around, but Fred had actually been reporting on the war, and he wrote about what he saw, and he wrote a letter to his family about what he saw. And that letter has been passed down generation after generation, and they read it every year. And that's what I think got Andy Friendly, who's on the board of Shoah, to really be interested in doing this, and talked about that legacy and that passing down of story to generations. And so to me, the ROTC was sort of like that, where I felt like we have to remember that when we see this guy that's 90 years old, that's 100 years old, that's not the guy that was there. The guy that was at the camps, the guy that, you know, the women who were at the camps, the survivors of the camps, were kids. You know, they were children. They were 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, these liberators. So the way that I wanted to bring the ROTC kids there, for people to understand this reflection across the generations and that connectivity, like, these kids that you see in the ROTC, that's who these liberators were. They were those kids. They were that young. They were that new to the world of experience. And I think that, again, I wanted that to kind of come together. And then I also wanted to make the point of them, of the importance, again, of like passing these stories down through generations. And I think back to sort of the question of educating and people seeing the film, to me, I hope that the film elicits the feeling of people watching it, for them to remember to, like, ask your parent, ask your grandparent questions, connect the grandparents to your children, you know, have these cross-generation conversations, and do Q&As with your family on Zoom, you know, and learn those things. Because as much as I know people say history repeats itself, and I actually think it's not history necessarily that repeats itself, but it's human nature. And human nature repeats itself. So I think if we can learn about human nature from our elders and people who have lived these things, it just, I think that's what it's about.
This is really a question that is a follow-up to what you're talking about. This is from Chen. He says, it's evident that this subject matter runs deep in your family. Have you ever visited the camps, or were your grandparents survivors?
No, my grandparents weren't survivors. I had a great I think I guess he's like a great uncle who got a Purple Heart, was in World War II. But no, my grandparents were not. They were in New York at the time. But I've come from a Jewish family. Yeah, so they weren't there. But again, I don't know that we need to be there to feel that, you know. I made a film. The way I got introduced to the Shoah people was I made a film with them about one of the last living survivors of the Nanjing massacre that happened in China in 1937. You know, and I have no connection to, you know, personal connection to Nanjing or to this woman's experience, but and the whole film was in, you know, not in, just again from another country, another era completely, but I feel like the experiences that she talked about, they're human, and you know, we can understand what that is.
You know, it's evident you just have such incredible empathy. So you start doing something like this film and you feel it. I mean, you just, and not only did you just brought it to everybody with such passion, and it was so powerful. So, I mean, I thought it was incredible. Now, another question, have you considered developing a curriculum based on your film?
Yeah, so that's what so Shoah, the Stronger Than Hate initiative, and the Shoah Foundation, that's what they do. Part of what they do is develop the educational curriculum that goes along with it.
Oh,
And again, and that's what I'll just make sure that participants tonight are able to get access to learn about kind of tools that are available, and ways, like if you are someone that works within a school, you know, group or museum or anything, that any kind of gathering or anything that you would like to have for educational use, I'll make sure that I get that information to anyone here.
yes, that's great. And we'll do the Breck Film Fest, we'll do a follow-up email
Yeah.
on that. You know, Vanessa, probably we could close out with this present day political environment, and how maybe if you have any kind of feelings about what your film means in this kind of environment. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I have a lot of thoughts about I have a lot of feelings about that. And I've been thinking about that because you and I spoke, you know, before now, and what to say about this moment. And I think the most important thing at this moment is, I think you have to stand up for what you believe is right. Every one of us, we have to get involved with things. We have to, you know, talk to our school boards, talk to the teachers of our kids' classrooms, make sure they're teaching history, make sure they're teaching things like the Holocaust, make sure that we, you know, use and speak with, like I said, speak with understand firsthand accounts of things that have happened, and talk to each other about those things. And when you know, the end of the film to me just always gets me, like just moves me so much, is about, you know, is about speaking up against hate, and it doesn't have to be on a huge platform, but it can be in your small, you know, in your own life with family members and friends. Don't let comments and lies and divisiveness just sort of go by and sit by, but speak out against that. You know, and talk to your kids, and don't be afraid of talking to them about what it means to be empathetic, and to be compassionate, and to be kind. And again, I think in the end, that's all I hope with this film and any of the films that I make, is that I think that the power of storytelling may be the most important kind of sort of political action almost that you can take, because it goes away from your like idea or theory of something, and you can't really debate someone's experience. Their experience is what it is. So yeah, I don't even know, again, like your question, obviously it's a difficult time on so many levels, and I just think you need to, you know, we all need to do our research. We need to look for what's truth. We need to not not let ourselves feel too overwhelmed, but actually act and push for things that we believe are right.
Wow. Well, on that note, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us to give some of your insights into this incredible film that you did. And also I want to thank the Breck Film Festival. And remember, audience, that you have the ability to watch the whole block of films, Lessons from the Holocaust, until October 4th. And in that block of films, you can see Liberation Heroes. So once again, Vanessa, thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you
And
so much.
we'll look forward to your other films that are coming out, because I know you're hard at work at some of them. So thank you, and thank the audience as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.